most of you know me, and some of you have probably seen a shorter version of this talk. So I'm the eldest daughter of Chris Moncrieff, pictured here at the Royal Oak pub, Hayland Road, more or less opposite the road, opposite from where our family home was in Hayland Road. So if, you know, a few years ago, his name wasn't well known. Well, I say a few years ago. It's hard for me to look at it from that aspect, but he wrote a lot of stories where his name wasn't listed as the byline. But it's only really after his retirement in 1994 that his name was printed. So, but you will definitely have read some of his stories. And as a reporter, he always called himself a reporter, not a journalist. And working for the Press Association, his stories were picked up by national newspapers and other media outlets. So as I said, his name didn't feature. Tony Blair said, as a young MP, he soon realised that Moncrieff was the gateway to the nation, the one journalist who mattered. After his death in November 2019, Alistair Campbell tweeted that he probably filed more political stories than anyone in the history of political journalism, liked by everyone, trusted to be fair and straight by everyone. When Dad died after a short illness, there were obituaries in almost every newspaper, many of them recounting funny stories from his life. So the talk is more about Dad than the funny stories, because these have all been published. You can find all these obituaries online and lots of other photos. But what I'm sharing is mostly stuff I've found whilst clearing the family home, lots of photos and ephemera, which form the basis of this talk. So we'll start with Dad. Haven't got too many of these, you'll be glad to know. So born on the 9th of September 1931, here he is aged 9 months. Born in Chadstone, just outside Derby. By the time of the 1939 register, the family were living at 8 Station Road, Borrowash. I think this photo, I spent too much time looking on Google Street View to try and figure out which house was which, but I think this photo is of their Chadstone address. Dad is here in his Triang pedal car. And this is a view of Station Road, Borrowash. I haven't got a date for that. Dad's, not showing, oh sorry, I'm not showing my whole, I just got to move my little box. I'm trying to be technical here and it's, oh sorry, my box isn't showing the whole, oh God, this has never happened before. Right, just go back one. So his father, Robert White Moncrieff, 1903 to 1983, was a scientist, and these are just 3 of the many books he wrote on very different subjects. I've actually got in my flat all of these books, and for some of them, the man-made fibres ones, I've got every edition, plus in different languages as well. So if anyone has any ideas what I could do with these books, please let me know. So his Dad's grandfather was William Moncrieff, 1875 to 1946. And one of the books on the previous slide, written by his son, was dedicated to William, a pioneer in the weaving of artificial fibres. The certificate is tiny, and I've put the cycling medal from the YMCA for scale, and it's dated, the certificate is dated December 1900, when William was 25. And technological examination, I shouldn't have started saying that, but these just amazing things that I found in the house. Dad was sent to Ockbrook Moravian Girls' School, as his parents didn't think any of the local boys' schools were good enough. Thankfully, he wasn't the only boy. Ockbrook was founded in 1799 and closed in June this year due to financial problems. This is him with his sister Ruth on the beach in what looks like their school uniform. I've been unable, I tried tweeting them before they closed down, but I've been unable to find out whether this insignia is from Ockbrook. Whilst at Ockbrook, he won a prize for knitting an egg cosy, which had been knitted by his sister. She was much put out by that. After Ockbrook, he was sent to Nottingham High School, where he was for 5 terms. His parents then sent him to Ellesmere College, Shropshire, from 1944 to 48. He's second from the left in the middle row here of Woodard's house cricket team. In a recording of interviews done by Waltham Forest Oral History Workshop, Dad said that his time at Ellesmere was of no benefit to him. I found this letter. I don't think my parents ever chucked anything out. I just found amazing things going back decades. This letter dated January 1949. I'm not sure you'll be able to read it, but it says, to me, it looks like it's got a typo in it. So it's from Oxford and Cambridge Schools Examination Board, and it says, I enclose a statement confirming you're very good in Latin, and your is Y-O-U-R. I'm very confused by this, and I haven't got the enclosure, unfortunately. His parents wanted him to go into law, and not shown here, but there is also a letter from Ellesmere College saying he would make a good solicitor. Dad always wanted to be a newspaper reporter, and he said his parents forced this job at solicitors in Holborn onto him. It didn't last very long, only a matter of months, because he was frantically writing to lots of newspapers to try and get a job as a reporter, or to get to train as a reporter. So this letter, so, you know, he was only there a couple of months. He hated the job, but he made a really good impression on them. This letter, part of it says, we are all extremely sorry that your son has decided to leave us, because he was very intelligent, very punctual, and most willing to help. And I'm sure he would have done very well in law. Note that the letter is addressed to his mother. Whilst working for the solicitors, as I said, he'd been pursuing other prospects. So this is another letter written by his mother, to his mother, from R. Ackrell, publishers of the Harrogate Herald. And they say in 1949 that they already had a sufficiency of young men under training. This document on the left-hand side is Articles of Apprenticeship with the Harrogate Herald, dated 7th of June 1949, less than a month after the letter saying they had a sufficiency of young men. The deed is actually between the proprietors of the paper and Dad's father as guardian and Dad as apprentice. So that it says it's to learn the profession of journalist for a term of 5 years from that date. The deed is dated the day before the solicitor's letter. Dad should have done his national service when he was 18, but Ackrell wanted to keep him for 4 straight years, so it was deferred until he was 20. He went into the Royal Army Service Corps. He asked to be transferred to the Intelligence Corps and was sent to their base in Uckfield. Unfortunately, they found out he could do shorthand, so much to his dismay, he was put into an office. He then put in a request to join the Joint Services School for Languages in Bodmin, but unfortunately he was unsuccessful. The office he was working in was where the drafts for people going abroad were done. So he sneakily put his own name down on one of the forms, and this worked. And he was subsequently drafted to Malaya, which is where this photo was taken. He became known there as Monty. On his return from Malaya, he worked for a number of different local newspapers, including the Coventry Evening Telegraph and the Thirsk, Bedale and Northallerton Times, which he says in the recording that he did for the Oral History Workshop, that he ran single-handedly for a while. I found this newspaper whilst clearing the family home, dated 12th of April 1951. There are some really great headlines here. I particularly like the one, Mr. Leng blamed the weather. Just bizarre. And the fact that no one dodged the census in Thirsk on the front page of the paper. This photo, I have absolutely no idea what is going on here, and I feel you could use it for a caption competition. Dad is holding a cricket bat, and it looks like his colleague is holding, it looks like a squash racket. I'm not 100% sure. So I found quite a few of Dad's business cards in the house. He started working for the PA Press Association Parliamentary staff in 1962 and became a lobby reporter in 1973. Dad had just wanted to be a general reporter, but he couldn't turn down an offer from the PA. He always said that he was never a political animal and was only ever interested in getting the story and to be the first one to file that story. So note on the business card his phone numbers, including Annie's Bar. Everyone knew to find him there. Annie's Bar was a bar within the House of Commons where politicians and journalists were both welcome and didn't have to attend as a guest. Dad actually used to have, I've been told this and read it as well, that he would have a pint of Guinness at each of several bars around the House of Commons, so he could just have them on the bar and then get his story, go to the next bar, chatting to other people, and there's always a pint of Guinness there for him, and he didn't have to waste time in ordering it. So this is just showing, so I found this wedding invitation to Dad's parents from my mum's, my maternal grandparents, inviting them to their wedding. And this is my mum with me as a baby in our very, at that time, tidy garden. They married at St Columba's Pont Street in Chelsea, and then afterwards at the Black Bull in Fulham Road. So this on the left was the family home which was sold earlier this year in Hayland Road. In Hayland, technically at some point was Walthamstow, although their address was with Woodford Green, Essex. It's just an anomaly. Back in August 1963, Dad was one of the very first reporters on the scene of what became known as the Great Train Robbery. In an article written for the Yorkshire Post on the 50th anniversary of the robbery, Dad recounted that a few days after the robbery, when he was on site, he was approached by one of Scotland Yard detectives who said he had a good story for him. It was that the police were urging anybody who happened to notice that any male neighbours had mysteriously disappeared that they should alert their local station. Anyway, this backfired. So it was the case that one of the neighbours who lived close to our family home reported that they hadn't seen my dad for quite some time. The story goes that my mum answered the door to the police officer, and when asked where he was, said he was on the Great Train Robbery. Dad must have had a photographic memory, as in later years he was often called on by radio and TV for comments on stories from decades earlier, which he seemed to be able to do at the drop of a hat. In December 2017, I was with my dad at a Christmas event at Walthamstow Assembly Hall, and when we got back to Hayland Road, Dad had a message to call the office to talk to them about Christine Keeler, who had just died. And now and then he still pops up on programmes spouting forth on some story or another. There are many photos of Dad that were used for his obituaries, but this is one I haven't seen anywhere else, but I found it in the family home. 1981. This it's a bit hard to see what it is. It was actually a diary, 1979 diary, that he turned into an address book. And it is in a bit of a state, but even so, when you open it up, there are still phone numbers of people that are still alive, you know, politicians. So I thought it's better to show you the cover rather than, I don't want to get myself into trouble. Dad never gave away his political leanings and always agreed with the point of view of the person he was talking to, which built up their trust in him. In clearing his belongings, I found various letters, many letters like this one from Enoch Powell, asking him to give it your usual treatment. Unfortunately, I couldn't find what was attached. So that's March 78. On more than one occasion, MPs asked him to write their quotes for him. A motorcyclist had been killed by running into a cow on Oak Hill, close to the family home. Dad came up with the idea that the cows should be daubed with luminous paint. He just had to find an MP to say it. This time, it was Marcus Lipton, Labour member for Central Lambeth, who would be writing to the City Corporation with his idea. Not his idea, it was my dad's idea. It might have been better if Dad had found an MP who was a bit more local. I mean, I can only imagine he must have tried the local MPs like Norman Tebbit, our local MP, first. It does seem strange that, you know, a Lambeth MP would agree to do that, but who knows? I'll never find that out. In an article in the Observer in 1984, they reported on the fact that it was Dad who had been granted a hospital interview with Norman Tebbit, our local MP, as just said, after the IRA Brighton bomb. And then Dad gave the press conference himself. Peter Hillmore, writing in the Penn Dennis column, where this was mentioned the fact that one MP had actually given Dad free rein to make up quotes, as he said, "You know what I'm going to say anyway." Hillmore also said about Dad's dress sense that he made astronomer Patrick Moore look immaculate. I've also found a whole load of press passes from the party political conferences, loads of those. These are some of the more interesting ones. And I read recently that he visited, well, up to 1994 when he retired in inverted commas, he had visited some 40 countries with various prime ministers. And you may have heard this story before. I said I wasn't going to tell any of his funny stories, but I have to just tell one. It's one of my favourites. Dad was alerted at short notice that he needed to make a trip to the Falklands. So he rang up my mum. She was given instructions to put a bag together for him and rushed up to town to hand it over. When he finally arrived at his hotel room many, many hours later, he emptied the bag on the bed to discover that Mum had packed 2 shirts, suntan lotion, and a pound of carrots, which she had forgotten to remove from the shopping bag. I can just imagine my mum in a bit of a fluster trying to get the stuff ready for him. This passed to cover, as you can see, the PM's visit to the Great Wall of China. And this was the occasion where John Major saved my dad from falling off into somebody's collective farm, as he said. So Dad had, this was 1991, Dad had got behind the press pack and he said he was hurtling out of control, and John Major saved him, as you can see in the picture. Dad, of course, wrote a story about it. I found this, I can't actually remember where I found this, but unfortunately this is the best copy I can find of the picture, so you can't see the whole writing underneath, but it says, the significant bit is, so it's Lech Walesa, and then it says, with a dubious looking Polish Premier, Mr. Rykelsin, in the background, Western Morning News, 5th of November 1988. So obviously the dubious looking man in the background was my dad and not the Polish Premier. I did find this elsewhere online on the British Newspaper Archive from a different newspaper, but they didn't have the same line, same comment underneath. I found many invitations to some really grand events that he was invited to. Actually, this one is the one I'm the most jealous of, the Royal Iris. I'm sure most of you know that the Royal Iris is in a gradually deteriorating, well, it's very deteriorated already, state. I think it's at Woolwich, and it's just been left there since, I think, for about 20 years now. But this occasion was 1985, when the former Mersey ferry, with 3 other former ferries, left Liverpool on a 1,500-mile round trip to London on a publicity drive for Merseyside. She docked aside HMS Belfast. I just would have, I was around then. I wish, but I wasn't interested in it then. But I wish somebody would come along and rescue this boat, which is, as I said, derelict. This Glenn Williams cartoon really sums up my dad's look. He was a drinker of draft Guinness in vast quantities until 1983. The story goes, and this is another story. I just can't believe my dad went to a fortune teller. But that is the story. He went to a fortune teller. He was trying to find out something about the conference, and the fortune teller told him, if you don't stop drinking within a year, you'll be dead. So he just stopped just then. 1983 was the same year his father died. So I don't know whether those things are connected, but he didn't touch a drop of drink after 1983. Glenn Williams, who drew the cartoon, was a cartoonist with the Daily Express. So his colleagues, this is before he gave up drinking, his colleagues bought him 1 share in Guinness and they all signed it. Now, of course, it's part of Diageo, and I'm now getting the dividends. I've just had one for 45p. But anyway, I just love this this framed certificate. I'm not interested in the dividends. Many of his obituaries referred to him as a legend, so it was really great to find this performance assessment from 1991. Brief comment, a legend. Former Tory MP Sir Nicholas Winterton once said of him, the best journalist in this place is the oldest journalist, Chris Moncrieff. You tell him something, he reports it. He does not dress it up, he actually reports. He often worked 18-hour days on the first train in from Hyams Park and the last train home. Even when we were on holiday, he'd be on the lookout for news to report. Actually, I only found out recently that he had told my mum that he only got 2 weeks holiday a year, and which was untrue. And he also sometimes told us that he was summoned back to London, and he wasn't. He was just a workaholic. That's why he was so successful. He had many scoops, including Margaret Thatcher's resignation. Her press secretary, Bernard Ingham, rang him and said, she's gone. Bernard Ingham and his wife were great friends of my parents, and they often met him and went to visit him. During the Westland affair in 1986, Dad was shown part of the infamous letter written by the Solicitor General, which was part of an attempt to discredit Defence Secretary Michael Heseltine. Dad did the story, and the affair culminated in Leon Britton as Trade and Industry Secretary and Heseltine resigning. It was during Thatcher's time as Prime Minister that he was awarded the CBE for services to journalism. That's the 1990 New Year honours. He also received a number of awards. Sorry about the rather wonky photo, but it's quite difficult to take a picture of it because it's a bit like a mirror. So this is the 1993 British Press Awards. The date of the awards was 25th of February 1994. The presentation was at the Savoy. The Chairman's Awards went to both my dad as political editor and also to Kelvin Mackenzie, who was the former editor of The Sun. The British Press Awards are now known just as the Press Awards, and back in 1994 they were organised by the UK Press Gazette and sponsored by the Press Association. And this is another award which is also hard to photograph. This is from 2010, when Dad was awarded the Diamond Jubilee Award for his role as a political journalist by the Political Studies Association. It is an award made to an individual journalist making a significant contribution to politics over a sustained period. I don't have an image, but in February this year, I was asked to be a guest presenter for the PA Editorial Awards, which were held online. My job was to present an award for the Chris Moncrieff News Reporter of the Year. The winner was Jane Kirby. This award had actually been created last year. I only found out about it this year. The previous winner was Harriet Lyne. Dad was a lifelong Derby County fan. This image is from when Dad did a podcast for Londonist Out Loud in 2012. This is another wonderful photo that I found in the house. Every Christmas when we were children, we all used to go to the lobby children's parties, and Dad always dressed up as Father Christmas. And he always used to say that I think it was one of us, after Margaret Thatcher's visit to the party that year, had asked if the nice dinner lady was going to come back again. Because I think she was helping. I can't remember, it was a long time ago, but one of us did say that. So we often had to be careful what we said when Dad was in earshot. Mum's Victoria sponge, baked for my school, Selwyn School Bazaar, was accidentally put in the children's section, and she came second to a boy of 9. That ended up in the papers. And I'm pretty sure she actually ended up on the Today programme. A few years ago, 10 or so or 15 years ago, my sister entered into the London Marathon and just mentioned at the end that she'd been beaten by a camel and a rice pudding, and that ended up in the papers as well. We had to be quite careful what we said. For quite a few years, Dad took on the editorship of the local parish magazine. He received hate mail. He was accused of nepotism. He did try to recruit all of us to write something for it to help fill the pages. It wasn't really a parish magazine. It was more about, I think one of the letters that he got was like, "We don't want your Fleet Street ways here," that type of thing. And he also had to go to the vestry in the early hours of the morning to print the magazine in an attempt to avoid encountering the vicar, who was always wanting to interfere. On the 11th of August 2006, the Telegraph published an article Dad wrote about the trials and tribulations of editing the magazine. Unfortunately, well, in my mind, it was published during the summer holidays when Mum and Dad were holidaying in Hunstanton, so I never discovered how it was received. No names were mentioned, but if you lived locally, you would have known which parish it referred to. This I can't think what the word is, sort of dummy cover. Actually, I think it was a dummy cover, but it was produced by the Conservative Party, marking the fact that Dad was covering his last party conference in October 1993. Dad was presented with this framed cartoon by George Gale at a lunch held on the 13th of July 1994 to mark his retirement, age 63. That was the PA's retirement age. 100 plus parliamentary journalists attended. And this image was also on the front of the menu card. And shown in the cartoon are some of the party leaders he worked with during his 32 years at that point in 1994 time at the PA. There was a party on the House of Commons terrace, which I was invited to. And also here you can see a letter from Edward Heath saying some very nice things about him. Actually, I'm not sure you'll be able to read it. I'll just read a short bit of it. It says, over the years, we have both seen remarkable changes at Westminster, and throughout the time, your integrity, honesty, and political insight have added to the life of the House. He wasn't the only person to say something. On the 21st of June 1994, 123 MPs tabled a motion in the House acknowledging with gratitude the enormous contribution made by him over the past 32 years as a parliamentary and lobby correspondent. Plus, a number of them put their thoughts into a hardback book, which I've got. I've actually got 2 copies of that. The day after his retirement party, he was back in the office, not surprisingly. So what he did after retiring, one of the things he did was come up, search for what he called quote pars. He contributed 10 quotes a day, which were sent to the PA, and they'd be printed in. I used to see them as sometimes, not that I read the Daily Mail anymore, but I have seen them in there. But the trouble was, so my parents got all the newspapers, and you go around, read the Sunday papers, and you're reading one, and then suddenly there's a hole in the paper because Dad had got up at the crack of dawn, gone through the papers, cut them out. These are just a couple of the ones that I found. And I think they're from John Redwood, Kelsey Grammer, and it might be Leslie Thomas. I'm not sure about that one. So after retirement, he started writing columns. He wrote columns for the Western Morning News for some time, and the House magazine, although, I found this is a really nice paperweight I found in the house. Although this diary is actually from 1987, so before he retired, but I've got loads of his columns that he wrote for the House magazine. And right up until a few months before his death, he was still doing a weekly column that was distributed around regional newspapers. I don't think it was in any London papers, but if you live elsewhere in the country, you may have seen it. So he did used to normally type them up himself, but in about I suppose it's about the last 8 months of his life, I was doing the typing up, because I'm the one with the fastest typing speed in the family, and Dad, like many people of his age, never put his hearing aid in, so he would dictate the story straight. He'd just think of it. It always amazed me. He would just dictate it without writing it down. But once he started, he didn't stop. And so if I didn't hear it properly, I normally had to wait to the end, because he just couldn't stop in full flow, and he couldn't hear me if I tried to say, can you just hold on a moment? So yeah, it was right up until just a couple of weeks before his death he was doing that. He also contributed hundreds of obituaries to the Press Association's bank of obituaries. And actually, when Honor Blackman died, because I'd set up Google Alerts for him, and there was one So although he hadn't done the most up-to-date obituary, his name was still in the document somehow. So in 2007, Moncrieff's it was sort of a cafe bar opened. It was the press bar. I believe it's today now just a cafe, but he's the only journalist to have a bar named after him. Dad's trademark image, which I've alluded to earlier when I've crumpled, was a suit that looked as if he had slept in it, a bundle of papers under his arm, plus a number of biros in his pocket that usually leaked. And you can see the outline of him, which looks exactly as he looked. These 4 photos, you can see, I think this was before my dad gave up Guinness, I think he probably showed it to my mum, and she probably said, "You're not using those photos," which is why they're still complete. I've always loved this photo of my mum and dad on Cromer Pier. They always used to take the Coast Hopper bus for free, 50 miles from Hunstanton to Cromer to go to the end of the pier show, have lunch and then go back again. It was only recently that my niece pointed out to me that Dad had the traditional ink stains on his shirt. We found out after his death that he'd also mentored many young journalists. There are so many wonderful obituaries of him online where you can read more if you're interested. He also did loads of after dinner speeches with many funny stories. I remember when he spoke to the Westminster guides, that's tour guides, not girl guides, and he was very frail walking up to the podium. And you could see everyone thinking, how on earth was he going to deliver a speech? However, once he got going, we were all in hysterics. He actually came to talk to us twice. And after the second talk in 2013, a fellow guide, Catherine, who was working for the Association of Jewish Refugees, got in touch. And as a result of that, Dad did talks for them in London, Bournemouth, Oxford, Bristol, Norwich and Cardiff in 2014. I think she was a bit worried that, it'd be a bit too much for him to travel to all these places, but he loved delivering these talks and he loved having a day out too. Many of, I've already said that. So many of the funny stories that he recounted in his talks can be read in the obituaries. So he wrote 3 books: Living on a Deadline, The History of the Press Association, Wine, Women and Westminster, about the shenanigans of what was going on in Parliament, just, not serious at all, no index. He purposely put no index because he didn't want anyone to look themselves up. And also the 3rd book is called Naught as Queer as Political Folk, which is along the same lines as Wine, Women and Westminster, but we don't have a publisher as yet. Earlier, I mentioned Waltham Forest Oral History Workshop recorded a series of 12 interviews with Dad. These can all be found on the sounds section of the British Library website. The best way to find them is just to search British Library Moncrieff, and you'll find them. Sometimes it's he's not listening because he's again not got his hearing aid in, but it's amazing that those 12 interviews are online and record his life. So I hope you've enjoyed my talk about my dad, and I've still got boxes of more stuff to go through actually. So this is me. So I'm a City of Westminster and Clerkenwell and Islington tour guide, and if anyone's interested in coming on my walks or virtual tours, I've got real life walks in Walthamstow and Chinkford coming up, and real life and virtual foodie themed Christmas lights walks in December. So I hope, or anyway, I'm happy to answer any questions now.